Does this look familiar? It's traffic outside of Nashville. This was yesterday morning, I believe. Drivers had quite a hard go of it getting into town, especially with the rain, and there were a bunch of accidents. And we're here with Steve Bland, the CEO of MTA. And Steve, when you look at this kind of traffic in the morning, what are you thinking?
Usually I'm glad I'm not sitting in it. And to be clear, you know, what a viable and a robust transit system offers isn't necessarily, you may still have the choice to sit in traffic, but to have other mobility options. And I think one of the best examples in Nashville is the Music City Star, the commuter rail line that runs between Lebanon and Nashville. You know, I-40 can be very congested in the morning, and if you throw in an accident or bad weather, it gets 10 times worse. Folks on the Star are used to a very reliable ride. They know it's going to be as fast as driving, and they know they can rely on that travel time. And as a result, a whole lot of them use it.
And it's popular. I mean, it's
extremely
very popular. I mean, every time I look at that train, it looks almost full every day.
Last month, it was funny. I was at the city of Lebanon was doing a ribbon cutting for their new town square, and Commissioner Schroer, the TDOT commissioner, was speaking. And while he was speaking, the Star went by and blew the whistle, so he had to disrupt his speech. And he mentioned, hey, there goes the Star. We're really multimodal here. Whole crowd broke into applause. It's something that part of the region really respects. They're glad they have it, and frankly a lot of other areas in our region want something similar.
Yeah, it is one thing you think about. I mean, a lot of other major cities, maybe, you know, we don't have a subway, but, you know, is there room for some other kind of commuter rail system for these folks, you know, in these satellite communities trying to get in every day?
And what we're hearing from people out in the region, from Murfreesboro, from Dixon, from Clarksville, is if you give me an alternative that's reliable and that's as fast as my car, I will absolutely use it. So it's that frequency, dependability, and the speed with which they can get into the city.
I believe we have Philip, who is on line 2. Again, if you want to join in on the conversation here with Steve from the MTA, the number is 615-737+, 615-737+. Philip, go ahead. Tell us where you're calling from first.
Nashville.
Nashville. What part of Nashville?
Madison.
Madison. Okay. And what's your question or your comment here?
Kudos to the first caller. I agree 100%. We are not New York. We're not Boston. We're not San Francisco. I've lived in Dallas, Texas, where they have interstates built big enough to handle the traffic. Y'all keep pushing this stuff down our throats. We don't want it in Nashville. Just like we didn't want the state income tax.
But Philip,
refused it.
Philip, I got to ask you though. I mean, you can only expand the highways so many ways. I mean, you know, you look at I-65 or 24. I mean, you can't keep going out sideways anymore in some of those spots. It's just not possible. It's not plausible. So what? I mean, what do you say to that? You can't. I mean, you can't have 15-lane highways.
15-lane highways. We don't have 8-lane highways. We've got 4 and 3 and 2-lane highways. The interstate system here is pathetic. And we keep moving people in. I'm sorry if the people moving here from San Francisco and Washington, D.C. and New York City and Boston, Massachusetts want this. We don't want it. We're sick and tired of hearing about people wanting it. A small minority. We don't want it. Give us interstates big enough to travel on. We like our automobiles. We like our cars. We like leaving when we want to leave. This morning on the news, an MTA bus missed its turn and got held up in a ditch. What happened to those people who were trying to go to work that were relying on that bus this morning?
I mean,
how many of them lost their job?
Well, Philip, it's the same as when there's an accident on the highway and they're sitting in traffic. I mean, you know, it happens. Something's going to happen on your way to work, one way or another sometimes.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that I've seen estimates that say to add 1 lane to Interstate 24 between Murfreesboro and Nashville, which is arguably the most congested commute in the morning, is about $1.5 billion. Last week, the governor was in Nashville doing a listening tour on transportation funding, and essentially the message that TDOT's presenting is, look, we don't have that money.
Right.
So we're going to have to get it from somewhere.
And you talk about Philip complaining there about income taxes and raising the income tax. Well, you want to build more highways and you want to build more roadways. You want to build anything, it's going to need to come from somewhere.
And let's be clear, it's not about forcing people out of their cars. I mean, most people will drive for most trips. That's absolutely true. But there will be trips that a good number of people will say, hey, this is a pretty good alternative. You know, and I would say folks who take what I'll call the conservative view of it, well, what's the most efficient, what's the most cost-effective way to do this? You know, I would argue is what's the least amount of money we can spend to move the most people and the most goods, as opposed to necessarily the most vehicles. Right. So I think it's a key issue.
I believe we have Jay on line 3. Jay, where are you calling from?
I'm near Spring Hill.
Near Spring Hill, okay. And what are you calling about?
Well, first of all, Mr. Conte, I just want to say you're a great reporter, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I live down here, and I would love to see like a rail system, you know, go through Spring Hill, Columbia, all the way to Nashville. I think that would be neat. And my aunt, who lives in Green Hills, which is a hot spot with traffic, it took her almost an hour just to get to Kroger the other day, she told me, because of the traffic, construction, etc. And also, coming back from we're big Vandy fans. We go to all the Vandy games, and coming back from Vanderbilt, going to Green Hills, and she's probably 20 minutes away. It took us an hour and 45 minutes after a game one night. And I just wondered what his thoughts were on the Green Hill area.
Yeah. Would you, Jay, if there was a commuter rail or some kind of light rail from Spring Hill, would you take it up to Nashville?
Absolutely. I think that would be awesome, because we come to Nashville a lot to Predators games and Sounds games. And the Sounds do a good job, I think, with their shuttle service. I think they do a great job. But, yeah, I'd love to see, like, a commuter train. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Boy, I wish he hadn't brought up Green Hills. That's a tough area. You know, a lot of limited options and a lot of spread out use.
And you go back to briefly, you know, our other caller who was talking about just expanding. Right. You have to look at some of these parts of the city, like Green Hills. There's nowhere to expand. I mean, and a lot of those places, you can't go sideways anymore.
Yeah, and I think we have to be strategic about our choices and say, well, okay, if we have limited dollars, where do we do that? Where do we put them for maximum return? You know, coming back to the point about, well, we don't want this to be Boston or New York or Chicago. I think the point of the planning, and I think frankly the point of the political process in this, is to make sure that whatever we come up with, whatever combination of roadway improvements, transit improvements, other improvements, is a Nashville solution. It isn't something that's being forced in from some other place.
Right. I believe we have another caller on line 1. Who are you? I didn't get your name there real quick.
My name is Robert.
Hey, Robert. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Madison.
Madison, okay. And what's your question?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that the people that complain about the transit system are those that have cars.
Right.
Secondly, I'd like to ask, with the growth of Nashville and everything that's been going on throughout the years, why is it that we don't have a 24-hour bus system in Nashville?
Okay. Steve? Point blank, why don't the buses run 24 hours?
Great question, and like everything else, there are a lot of things where we are limited, and a lot of that does have to do with resources and priorities. Do you run, you know, one route 24 hours a day and then say not run another route entirely? I will say this though, to date in our planning process, we've heard from over 5,000 folks. The two things that are coming up, particularly in the Nashville, in the city of Nashville system, as opposed to the outlying counties, the two things we hear more often than anything else are later service, you know, longer spans, so as he's indicating, up to 24 hours a day, and the other is more frequent service. Right. Most of our routes don't run any more frequent than, say, every 20 minutes, and what people really want to see and what they're expressing to us is, hey, if it's running every 10 or 12 minutes, 15 at the most, I can throw away the schedule and count on it coming quickly.
Yeah. Interesting. I believe we have Lucy who is on line 4 here. Lucy, well, what part of town are you calling from?
East Nashville.
East Nashville, just down the street.
Chris Conte, I really liked your interview skills. I really do. I want to say that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. They're just letting me fill in here today for a little bit. So.
Okay. Well, I wish you'd fill in more often.
Thanks.
Well, I have a couple of comments to make. It just seems like people don't realize that Nashville just where we're located in the United States, we have a lot of traffic moving through here. They've been working on the interstates almost nonstop, expanding them for over 35 years.
Yeah.
And it seems like a dumbing down of the people who are running the show, i.e. our politicians, because they put the cart before the horse. They used to run utilities out, roads out, train systems out, and then build development. Now they build development, and then they get the stuff out there. And then now we have this situation where the speed limit's been raised back up to 70 miles an hour, but when you get to a certain density of area, it drops back down to 55. Now, if you look at Nashville on the map, everybody's racing towards Nashville at 70 miles an hour to hit 55, and you want to know why you're having accidents everywhere every morning. I don't travel the interstates anymore during rush hour traffic, morning or evening, because it's just always something stupid. And when you look over and you see somebody reading a book or a map or putting their makeup on or texting, it's nerve-rattling.
I saw someone cleaning out their ears the other day.
I think has a plan. They're going to do what they've done in London and a lot of other cities where they're quote-unquote gentrifying us, and I've seen it in a book with this Nashville Next or whatever plan it was, this book I have. They're going to literally take the interstates out. The interstate that runs up between the new upcoming luxury development, but what we know as the projects today, in the Titan Stadium, they want to pull that out. And I've seen plans where they want to make around the Titan Stadium a yacht club and an island. They literally want to make it an island and have a yacht club.
I think some of those plans were just sketches in terms of ideal development things for the riverfront, and they were just part of a contest.
I've heard it recently that we need to take our interstates out and make them boulevards. Well, I'm like, you're talking about putting in an outer ring, and you can't make plans for Nashville when Nashville affects a large majority of the country.
It's true. I mean, a lot of people come through here, and I think another thing, that she makes a good point on is, if you want to keep expanding these roads, that's great, but you're going to have to deal with the constant construction. I mean, you look at the I-65 I-24 split. I mean, that's been 3 years now that's been like that. Or you look over by Lebanon and Mount Juliet on 40 there, and that's and that's the way TDOT works. I know this is a to completely separate agency from you guys, but we're just talking about transit, and so these projects are going to constantly be going on, and those that disrupts people's commutes.
And Lucy raises a tremendous point, and that is Nashville really is a focal point of the interstate system. You have 3 major interstates that basically bisect the city. So it's not just a regional commute market, it's a national travel market. So that's where I come back to what's the most effective mix of solutions that will get us through this and help us to absorb some growth and still keep the quality of life that we have.
Very spirited discussion happening here on Open Line on News Channel 5+. We are talking about mass transit in the city of Nashville. If you would like to join in on the conversation, the number to call is 615-737+. That's 615-737+, and we will be right back.